Good morning. Good morning. My name is Vicki Austin, and I am proud to be the president and CEO of the Wheaton Chamber of Commerce. I'm here with Doris Barrera, our membership coordinator, and a cast of famous people who are going to be sharing with you about diversity matters. And this is actually a project that is a sort of a cooperative between the Wheaton Chamber of Commerce and Innovation DuPage. And with that, with my clock ringing in the background, I would like to introduce Dan Faccini, who is in Italy, you would say Bikini, but Dan, as the new leader there at Innovation DuPage, would you be so kind as to share a bit? And for the purposes of your talk, I'm going to, let's see. Well, you know what? We'll just leave the slide up. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Faccini. I'm the Managing Director of Innovation DuPage, and we're thrilled to be partnering with the Wheaton Chamber of Commerce to present this important workshop series on diversity, equity, and inclusion. For those of you who don't know us, Innovation DuPage, at its core, is a community built around the needs of entrepreneurs and small business owners, which means we have the facilities, resources, and expertise that companies need to build from the ground up. And we also have signature development programs that are designed to quickly take businesses to the next level. So in fact, we have an upcoming owner to CEO program that's tailored to companies in the construction industry. So if you know anyone who in that industry, please keep it in mind. And that program is being sponsored by the Hispanic American Construction Industry Alliance. We're always reaching out to companies in the community that need our assistance. So for more information about any of our upcoming programs, please visit our website at innovationdupage.org, or you can always come pay us a visit as well. We're located in the Civic Center in downtown Glen Ellen. Without any further ado, back to Vicki to get today's program underway. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you again for your partnership. Jim Bell and Katie and Sam, all the folks that are at Innovation DuPage, we appreciate your partnership. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Joshua Lederman. Dr. Lederman is an active member of the Chamber. He energetically took on a brand new assignment with a brand new committee, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which was developed a year and a half ago, I guess almost 2 years ago, as a result of the protests in Wheaton, the murder of George Floyd, and the elevated conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our world as well as in our workplace. So Dr. Lederman is a chiropractor at Lederman Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. He and his lovely wife, who is also a chiropractor, are in practice together. And Joshua, I hope it's okay. I hope it's okay if I say that you are expecting a baby soon. So we believe in succession planning here at the Wheaton Chamber, and we are actively encouraging our members to bring their offspring with them. So we're going to have a baby contest, Dr. Joshua. With that, I will turn it over to you, and you may introduce, if you will, our guests, our speakers.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to introduce our two speakers. They are very qualified when it relates to DEI topics, so we're so excited to have them. Oralethea Davenport, Irwin Center Manager, Homewood Flossmoor Park District, and Tracey Crawford, the Executive Director of the Northwest Special Recreation Association. I hand it off to the two of you. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Oralethea, as Joshua said, and today we're going to talk about DEI terminology and language. We want to start by letting you know this is a safe space. It is also a brave space. We often tell people it's a safe space because we want you to feel comfortable so that you can say whatever it is that's on your heart or your mind to say. Ask whatever questions it is you would like to ask. But we also constitute it as a brave space because it does take a lot for you to think about your questions and be open enough to honestly ask the questions that you want to ask, to honestly answer the questions that we ask you. And we want everybody to feel that this is a safe space, okay? So we always get that out the way and start with every presentation we do, because I don't want anyone to ever feel uncomfortable about any of their thoughts or any of their questions or any of their responses, okay? So to start, and you can write this on a piece of paper or you can type it in the chat if you're comfortable, I want you to just take a second and think about what diversity means to you. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about diversity? Or does it mean anything? Does it affect you at all? What do you think?
Yeah,
When-
does anything come to mind?
Does anything come to mind when you hear diversity?
This is where we're gonna ask Josh, Josh, if you would read the chat.
Yeah,
I'm
and I got my
skilled,
chat
but-
box up too.
So what comes to mind?
Variety, differences.
Nice.
Nice. What about equity? What does equity mean to you? Plenty of people get confused with equity and equality and
Equality.
inclusion. They mix a lot of those up. So what does equity mean to you? What does inclusion mean? Equity, getting equal pay for the time, equal access, fair treatment, people having access to what they need. Everyone is a bit different. Very good point, Lucinda, very good. Equal access to opportunity. It is all very complex. This is very
It
true. It can
is.
be complex.
It is.
Opportunity for all. But it is making sure that everyone has equal access to things to be successful, viewed of their own person, lifting everyone up. Nice, good input on equity.
Nice stuff. Yeah.
Inclusion. What about inclusion? What do you think when inclusion comes to mind? If somebody says inclusion to you, do you have any thoughts on what that could mean? Intentional effort. I like it. My
I
word of
like
2020
that.
is intentional.
Marty, and it's early too. He came
Yeah.
out.
No one left behind.
Mm,
Everyone welcome. Nobody left out. Space for all voices at the table. Welcoming
I
to
love that.
all. Everyone is invited. And see, that's the difference, that everyone is actually invited. People talk about that, but that makes a big difference when voices are at the table and they've actually been invited to sit at the table and they are heard. Accessibility for everyone. Nice. What is your definition of racism? I'm always eager to see what people talk about when we say racism.
I agree. I agree.
Viewed and promoted as one for inclusion. Got it. Bias, racism, bias, prejudging people based on what's different from me or you. Discrimination of others, system of mindset and beliefs that hinders equal opportunity of people based on race. Nice. Prejudice, bias. The reason I always say that I'm interested to see what people think about racism is for exactly what some of you have said, even Lucinda just now, based solely on the skin color. We tend to get confliction when we talk about race, but because people want to bring in isms, which we'll talk about later, but they tend to think that everything discriminatory is actually racism, and that's not the case. Racism and discrimination are two totally different things. Voices are equal. Society's ingrained biases. You guys are great. Nice. Firing those answers out. And the last one, LGBTQIA. What does that stand for? Have you heard it? I'm sure you've heard it. I'm sure you've seen it.
Lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer.
Trans, intersex, asexual.
Amen. If
All
I had
right,
candy,
look
I'd
at-
be throwing it.
Katie got it. Like Vicky said, what
I
she
love
said.
that. Vicky, what she said.
Right, right. What she said. Got it. Okay, Katie just like knocked that out the box. I don't even need,
She knocked it out.
I don't even know if I need my slide when we go to that section.
I know. She
And look,
she
Lucinda
already
said, you type
knows.
fast. Sexual identity, ditto. Okay, lots of good things there with the LGBTQIA. So you guys are knowledgeable about things when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, and the LGBTQ plus community. So we're gonna move on, and what we're gonna talk about is language, why it's important and why it matters. So Tracey, I'm gonna kick it to you.
Okay, so I want you to think about something. Language encompasses a lot. Communication encompasses a lot, right? It's not only what we say, but it's, you can all say, think of what I'm going to say, how we say it, right? It's all of that. So language is so important when we're talking about connecting and communicating to a diverse environment, right? I mean, think about it. When you're talking to a teenager, well, when you're screaming at a teenager, right? You know, and they always say, why are you screaming? Because, you know, we all know they just zone it out, right? Right? Our language, they don't even care what we have to say because they're so focused on our tone. We're going to talk a little bit about all of that, but we're really going to focus in on the language we use in this area of diversity. And I know you've heard a lot of people say, oh, I'm afraid to say anything because it could be politically incorrect. It could be, okay, we're in our safe space. Oralethea and I both think sometimes things have gone way too far. Okay, you say one thing, then folks' feelings are hurt. So this is what we're going to say. Understand that the language you use has the power to uplift as well as marginalize. Okay, we're all human, but understand there's a difference between the intent of what we're saying and the impact that it has. We're going to talk about that. But our language, it can uplift somebody or it can marginalize someone. Unconsciously, we have our own biases. We have our implicit biases in our language. Here's a perfect example. I change my hair on a daily basis. It depends on my mood. The color could change, the style could change, all of that can change. Those biases come in when I walk in and you get, what's going on with your hair? You know, what did you do to your hair? Can I touch your hair? Okay, this right there for me, because hair is such a self-expression, that tone, that language says, so you're not pleased. I don't fit into what you perceive as beautiful, qualified to be as an executive director wearing that hairstyle. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's sometimes those little things. Oh, are you pregnant? When someone's gained weight, you know, you can get slapped. That can get you slapped. Okay. Certain words and how we use them can be damaging. That's what I'm saying. So really, when we're talking about language, we're just talking about being respectful. Thinking before you speak. What did my mother always tell me? There's a filter, right? There's a filter, and often we should use it. But let's be real. Finding the right word is difficult. Okay. And let me tell you something. Focus in on that second bullet, everybody. The right word rarely exists because what you think is right to that person that's receiving that end of that language or communication could be offended. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to do the best you can. You're going to educate yourself the best you can on whatever the new is. Okay. You're going to ask for grace. You're going to read people's body language. You can tell when you kind of hit wrong. You look at them and you go, ooh, right then jump in and say, wait, I don't want you to walk away. If I said something incorrectly, correct me. Teach me. I did not mean to offend. Is that making sense? Okay.
Yes.
Thoughtful word choices can be a part of creating more inclusive environment. So yes, we are in a day and age where you just can't say whatever you want to say, however you want to say it to whoever you want to. Those days are gone. Oralethea, you're going to talk about considering intent and impact.
Okay, so we ask everyone to consider intent versus impact. And when we switch to the next slide, I will define what both are. Intent is what you think or what you feel during an action or a conversation, what you thought you said, what you meant when you opened your mouth and verbally said whatever it is. It is usually the motivation or reason behind the situation or the conversation. And this one we use because we actually have a colleague that gets this more times than you can count at all. And I would like everybody to stop and take a minute and think, have you ever said this? Have you ever heard this? Or are you aware of this being done to somebody? Somebody looks at this gentleman and says, so like, what are you? What's the intent behind that? What are you asking? Are you asking what I am, whether I'm male, female? Are you asking what I am as opposed to culturally, racially? What does that mean? What is your intent behind that question? Go to the next slide. The impact, this is what the reaction or the conversation actually makes the other person feel. Okay, so your intent is what you meant to say or what you thought you were saying. The impact is how I took it, what I heard, and what that means to me. And she's holding a sign that says, I'm human. Being biracial does not make me a what. And like I said, my colleague gets this all the time. So we have to stop and consider, you know how the old saying is, think before you speak. We have to think before we speak, because it's not only the words we use, but it's also how we say things. And if you're not sure, first of all, why is it so important for you to know right now in this moment in time if I'm mixed or not, or if I'm male or female? If we're having a conversation and that has nothing to do with the conversation, why is that necessary for you to jump up and ask what I am? If
That
we're
gets
colleagues,
into my area.
right? If we're colleagues, if we're business partners, what does that mean to you? Impact versus intent.
And that carries right into the consideration of power and privilege. Oftentimes we feel I have the right, we have a certain power, I have the privilege, I can ask whatever I want to whomever I want to. What gives us that right? Why do I need to know what makes up that individual? Now, I may have thoughts in my head. We all do, right? You've seen people on TV and you say, I wonder what her background is. I have an aunt, she can't watch TV without going, I wonder what she's mixed with. And I'm like, oh, ain't Pat. But we do, there's a certain curiosity. What we're saying is it important in your role as leaders of agencies, of organizations, of businesses, that you ask that of your employees, of your patrons? Are you crossing the line? Are you taking advantage of your power and your privilege? I love this. Okay, this we actually pulled, and it's a whole YouTube, but we just pulled this. And the woman in the classroom is actually saying, she's yelling, speak English. We're in America, give me your phone. So you're demanding that this group, we can't see, but this group of individuals speak your language because why? You're uncomfortable. Why can't it just be, the point is, give me your phone, right? They're in a classroom, it looks like. Students who shouldn't have a phone. So really, why can't it just be give me your phone? Why do we have to get into speaking English and then clarifying where they are? Like we don't know that. So power, the ability or the official authority to decide what is best for others. So you've decided for these people that it's best that you speak English. Okay, think about that. Think about privilege. Okay, characteristically invisible to people who have it. Oftentimes, in Oralethea and I've done hundreds of these. And when we talk about privilege, and there's all different types of privileges, we always get, well, I don't have any privilege. We all do. We all do. We have the privilege, the fact that you got up and walked today gives you the privilege of walking, where there are other people that cannot ambulate that way. Okay. The fact that you're able to speak at all gives you the privilege of voice, the fact that you can see. So we all have some level of privilege. It's when that power and privilege get together, are we using that inappropriately when we're communicating with others? We're saying be aware of that in our language because it sends a different message. As Oralethea says, it'll hit that person differently coming from the owner of that company, the CEO, the boss, as opposed to maybe someone who is my equal. Does that make sense? So thinking about all that when you're talking about language. Oralethea.
All right, so let's get started and dive a little bit deeper into language and words. Let's start now with why language is important and the top 5 reasons we feel like you should think about the importance of language. One, it sets the tone and the context for the conversation, right? Where are we going? I often tell people I match energy. So what you give me is what you're going to get. So where's our conversation going to go? Words can be inclusive or divisive or exclusive, like Tracey said. Sometimes you can immediately cut somebody off by one word that you've just used and they're done. They don't want to talk. Or the language you use can let people know that you are including everyone and you're open to different perspectives and different people and having different conversations. Words often have different meanings based on the individual's diverse background. Like Tracey said, read body cues. Often you might say something that might be a little slightly unwelcoming, and you'll know by the eyes might get bigger, or they might stand back, or they might shift their body a little bit. So you can obviously initially tell that you hit a nerve somehow. Stop and ask, is everything okay? Did I say something inappropriate? Is there something I need clarity on? And ask. I often tell people you don't know unless you ask. So if you just assume, you've learned nothing. Everything can be a teachable moment. So if you need to be educated, take the time to learn. If you need to educate someone else, take the time to have the conversation. Language is constantly evolving. Remember that. So what we talk about today might not be the same next week or 2 weeks from now. Language is constantly evolving. Different groups are constantly defining and redefining themselves. So as Tracey said, give yourself grace and recognize that we're not going to know everything all the time. We can just do the best we can and educate ourselves. Using the correct terminology can identify diverse populations with respect and dignity, or lack thereof. So just remember when you're identifying people. And sometimes people may say, that's not how I identify. Clarify. Okay, now we're done. We're moving on. Conversation is done. You move to the next section. Frequently use DEI language that you should know. So let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We just spouted that out a little bit and asked what your opinions were. Diversity is primarily known as representation of various identities and differences, right? When we talk about voices at the table, that's the diversity. Inclusion is an effort to create environments to respect and value all people. Equity is in the center because it is the center of all things. Equity is the actual fair and equitable treatment and access and opportunity. People often say, and this is my favorite quote because people say it so many times, well, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I always respond with, well, what if you don't have boots or straps? What are you supposed to do? So that's what equity means. Equity means that if we're going to talk about pulling ourselves up by bootstraps, we make sure that everybody has boots and straps. So it's just that simple.
Starting where they are. It's not being worried about what's equal, okay? Because I may need a little bit more to you to experience, more than you to experience the same experience, okay? Now let's talk about, and we're picking out words that we have done in Illinois, over 60 conversations with agencies across the state and now nationally. We just started nationally doing a training. And the language that we pulled are the definitions that tend to come up in these 60 plus languages. So I don't know, 1,000 some people we've trained. And here are the definitions that they ask most about. Ally and advocate, you hear that a lot in the diversity world. Think of ally as an individual who speaks out and stands up for a person or group that is targeted and discriminated against. Okay, so I always think an ally is that person that is standing beside me. Okay, an advocate is the process of informing and influencing people. Okay, I always think of advocate with legislation. It's like that process of action. I'm going to talk to my legislator to get this change. I'm going to change this policy. I'm going to influence people. I'm going to do whatever it takes to educate and influence people to change this particular thing. We believe you need both. So we don't like the verses. It should be ally and, because sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you can be an advocate, okay? And you all a part of the Wheaton Chamber, you can be an advocate for the business community and advocate for diversity and the importance of it. Then individual business owners, you're allies because you're going to put it in action. Your hiring practices, you know, who you're welcoming and open the door to. You're putting diversity statements out there that's saying, come one, come all. And we talk about that next time.
Implicit bias. You may hear implicit bias, unconscious bias. It comes up a lot. I don't think people really deep dive and talk about what that means, but it is attitudes, stereotypes, and beliefs that can affect how we treat each other. Implicit bias runs contrary to our stated beliefs. We can say that we believe in equity and truly believe that we believe in equity, but then unintentionally behave in ways or set policies or do certain things that are biased or discriminatory towards certain groups. And that's where you have to stop and check your own bias. We often talk about checking your own biases. You have to learn what they are. Your stereotypes and your belief system are set up and created by who you are. That's everything that has happened to you, everything that you've heard about, everything that you have been taught along the way throughout your life. So that can be words from your grandparent, words from your mother, things you've overheard your parents say about certain groups of individuals when they're not in the room, what your favorite pastor says, your favorite teacher said over the years, what you've learned or seen in college. You know, all of those experiences and words that we hear make up who we are, and they make up that belief system that's in the back of our mind that half the time you don't even know is there. So what you have to do is learn what your biases are, or those stereotypes that might creep in your head when somebody says, well, you know how they are. Yeah, I do know. What do you really? What does that mean? That's a microaggression, and it leads into the stereotypes, which is your belief system, race, ability, all of those things matter.
Oralethea mentioned microaggression. If you are not aware of your implicit or unconscious biases, they can lead to microaggressions. We already talked about, you know, walking up to someone and saying, well, what does your hair look like today? You know, what are you? Okay, you don't speak Spanish when you look at someone who you believe is from the Latin descent. Okay, microaggression, demanding that someone speak English and not their language because it makes you uncomfortable. Okay, so microaggressions, it's a term used for brief and commonplace daily, hear what we say, daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities. They're the subtle things. You know, I used to get, you speak so well for a Black person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I can't know proper English, and you don't expect for me to. I went to college, I graduated, degrees, I'm certified. So the expectation is what? So those are microaggressions. This is the slide that we may not even need to go deep into.
Right, because I think you guys hit it all, but lesbian is considered female, attracted to female. Gay is considered male, attracted to male. Bisexual is considered being a gender, but attracted to more than two genders. Two or more genders, should I say. Trans is trans or transgender is a person that is considered to not be the same sex that they were identified as at birth. So you might have been told you were one thing at birth, but feel like you're something different, or understand that you are a different person from that. Queer used to be a derogatory term, but the LGBTQ plus community has embraced that now, and it is more towards individuals that don't want to define or don't feel that they should define their identity. It can also mean questioning. They are on a journey to figure out who they are and what sexuality and identity means to them. Intersex is a term that is used to describe someone who may have biological attributes of both sexes, and it does happen, or they don't fit into the societal assumptions of what constitutes a male or female. Asexual or ace, someone who does not experience sexual attraction at all. Ally, which we've already talked about, being that person that's right there beside somebody, and that is a cis person. For the purpose of LGBTQ plus community, they look at that as a cisgender person who is their ally, their supporter. You're right there in the trenches with them, and you're supporting what needs to get done. And the plus ensures inclusivity for all. So they want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to be who they are and not be labeled necessarily. Cisgender is a person who identifies with the sex they were assigned with at birth. I will be considered cisgendered. I was assigned female. I am a female. I feel I am a female. Transgender is an umbrella of term used to describe people whose true gender identity does not match the sex or gender they were assigned at birth. Gender fluid is a person whose gender identity or gender expression is not fixed and shifts over time, depending on the situation. Sometimes they might feel male, sometimes they might feel female, sometimes they're they and them. This was a slide, we put this one in is because we've talked about bisexual and people hear that a lot, but I've noticed that pansexual has come up a lot, and this does come up in some of our LGBTQ plus calls when people say, what is pansexual? And that is genuinely being attracted to a person regardless of gender. So they don't see male, they don't see female, they don't see transgender. They are in love with or attracted to the person that you are.
And if some of you are like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up, this is why you educate yourself, and you try to stay on top of, but trust us, we're all learning together. Okay. This, I will admit, is one of my blind spots. We have a very good friend of ours who's transgender, and I pick up the phone all the time and call Sophie. Sophie, okay, what's pansexual? Help me. And so she's like, okay. And she goes through, but I know that I need to stay educated in this area because it is not an area that I understand completely, but I am open to learning. So it is okay when you're learning all these terms to admit that's something new for me. Do you have, and this I love, Sophie taught us this, ask for materials, ask for places that you can learn more. And you know, if there's something and you've said something wrong, or someone wants you to say something differently, say, do you have any place where I can learn more? You see this a lot, BIPOC. What does that mean? It means Black, Indigenous, people of color. Okay. And you saw that coming out over the last 2 years where they're trying to unify a community of people. You'll also hear people mention Black and brown. I say that a lot. So I encompass all shades, okay, of our ethnicities and our culture. Another one is, now this one was new to Oralethea and I, Alana. Okay, African, Latino, Asian, and Native American. Okay, so this is the short acronym that they use to talk about this group of individuals. And we can't forget the isms, okay? When you're talking about language, it is important that you understand the isms. And we kind of saw this slide that helps bring it all together. So there's ableism, treating a non-disabled people as the standard. They're excluding the disability. This is huge in the disability community. And they're talking about their disability is a part of who they are. And you're going to hear the word, and I think I mentioned intersectionality, where it really talks about the disability is one piece. I could also be Afro-American, I'm a woman, and oh, by the way, I'm also queer. And so where all that intersects is what makes me who I am. But here's some of the isms: classism, racism, caste system, ageism. I hate as I'm getting older, I'm falling into that ageism. They sent me AAPRA's, no, what is it? AAP, is it? You guys know what I'm talking about?
AARP.
Oh, they sent me that before I hit 50, I swear.
I heard you're sending it to 25-year-olds, Tracey.
It hurts my feelings. It hurts my feelings. I'm not ready. Sexism, sexualism, sizeism. Now, this was a huge discussion it started with when they were talking about the models and the representation for our young ladies, and only seeing the little small sizes, and cisism. I say that wrong. Oralethea, you say it better. All right, next definition.
Institutional racism refers to the policies and practices within and across institutions that intentionally or not produce outcomes that chronically favor or put a racial group at a disadvantage. And that's pretty much a lot of policies and that are set in place, not only by businesses and agencies, but just America in general. And that's where we tend to notice institutional racism, because it's set in place by the powers that, like people often say, powers that be, you know, or they say, well, who is making the rules and the laws? Well, the people with the power and the privilege get to determine what the policies are, right? They get to determine what the system is going to say and do. And like somebody just put in the chat, schools is a huge representation of institutional or structural racism, how they're set up, how they're designed to educate or not educate, different opportunities. Opportunities that may be put in different groups of certain schools, but not in other schools. If they're in a poverty or a diverse community, they may not have the same opportunities that other affluent areas or predominantly white areas or whatever the case may be may have, depending on who's in power and privilege in that community, in that state, or across the US. And I often reference that because it truly it is determined by who sits at the table and the voices at the table, because those are the voices that get to determine the policy, procedures, and processes.
The last thing I'll say is we did a call with a town here in Illinois, and they did not realize that on the books, they are still listed as a sundown town.
Mhm.
That's institutional racism. If you're not familiar with what that is, that basically means that after when the sun goes down, individuals of color are expected to be in their homes or not in that community.
Mhm.
And we still have many cities in Illinois that are still listed as sundown towns.
Mhm. Colorism, prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a darker skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. This comes out sometime in different communities. I can speak about it in the Black community, where people would think a certain way about fair-skinned people as opposed to a darker complected. And this is where that prejudice comes in, or that unconscious bias, where your belief system automatically tells you that the lighter skinned person is the better person for whatever reason. You have no reason at all to know me from Tracey, or what both of us can bring to the table. But because of a preconceived notion, you might automatically think that I'm smarter, or that I might have more. And in actuality, Tracey's got more accolades and degrees than I have, you know? It is what it is. So we tend to put people in boxes and categorize people and think a certain way based on our stereotypes and beliefs. And that is a long lineage of, we could be here and talk about that all day, because that actually, colorism goes all the way back to slave days, when they would put the lighter skin lighter skinned slaves in the house, and the darker skin were forced to work in the field. So that is where that started, and it has for generations trickled all the way down. And that's what I can speak about on my community, in my community, because that's what I've lived.
Mhm. This is when we're talking about that intersectionality, and here is the definition. It is a noun. It is the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination. So you've got racism, sexism, classism are combined and they overlap. So like we said, you're looking at someone and they could be discriminated against in several different categories. They could have a disability, they happen to be a Black or brown descent, they are gay, lesbian, queer, okay, and all that overlaps. So can you just imagine the amount of discrimination, microaggressions, all of those things that make up that individual, but are unconsciously seen as less than and are marginalized in our community. So just language, always language, language, language. Gender and pronouns. You saw that in our right next to our names, we've become very conscious about putting our preferred pronouns. If you have not gone back to your forms or anything that you may have people sign up on, and you haven't gone to dropping the he and she and allowing people to identify what pronoun they want to be used, you need to do that. And your policies and all of that, it's better in policies to do the they and them as opposed to he or she. You know, back in the day, it was always he, and all of us women were just supposed to understand that that meant us too. Right. And then some people did the he/she, and now we're saying get rid of it. And if you can, just put they. Okay. But this is a great slide to help you kind of understand. My dad struggles with this. Oh my gosh, he struggles, you know, and he's old school, and he sees a girl, you're a she, ma'am. You know, he's Southern, and that's just the way it is. And he's struggling with, okay, so I can't say that. And so it is an uncomfortable area, but when you can, be aware of it.
So as we wrap up, I want everybody to understand we threw some of the main language and questions that people came up with when we've done different presentations and different safe zone calls, and the things that you might hear more frequently in conversation or around you or on the internet. But we are providing you with the glossary of terms. The National
Try clicking on it and seeing if it'll take me there.
Try clicking on it. The National Recreation and Park Association has done a great thing recently with moving forward and trying to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. We have a whole inclusive.
There it is.
Did you find it?
There it is. Oh, can you see it or no?
No, we can't see it. You might have to stop
hold on,
sharing
y'all. I'll stop sharing and then I'll go back You know, I'm old, so I got to talk myself through. Even though they sent me that magazine, I don't want to really. Okay, here it is.
Okay, this is it. Equity Language Guide. And then you can download it and you can save it. And yes, I will put the link in the chat before we leave. But this language guide was so inclusive. And it is straightforward to the point. It is lengthy. It covers a variety of different terms and language that is currently being used today. And the reason NRPA did that is because they are actively trying to make sure that we are hearing all of the voices, not just at our table, but within our community. And it is powerful. The words that are in there, like we said, language is ever evolving. They put time into this, effort into this. They paid a librarian to assist with this. So this is definitely one you want to keep in your back pocket. Download it, save it. I am going to drop it in the chat for you so that everyone has it and you don't have to worry about trying to find it. Let me just show you.
And just remember, the images we put out that represent our company and the language we use are the first impressions that people get about who we are and what we do. So we've always known that language, or I hope we've always known that language is so very important. Okay. Language to me means also in that marketing materials that you use, the pictures that you use, that speaks to me. So if I'm going to your website and you want me to feel welcome, how many clicks does it take to see people that look like me or to read something that actually says that I'm welcome? That's what we're talking about. Nowadays, people are putting their dollars where they feel that they are welcome. And they are choosing to not shop in places that they feel don't welcome or have made no effort to welcome. That's the reality of the world we live in. So all of these are census data, and that we put on there just so that you're aware of what your community looks like and who you should be speaking to. I say this all the time when we're working with park and recreation agencies. The assumption is always that they need to have, Spanish speaking and English, when in all actuality, maybe that second highest language spoken is Chinese, okay, or is Indian, or is something else. So knowing your demographics and knowing who you're speaking to is so important. And then we put up the Illinois IPRA, where Oralethea and I are both representing, because they have because we helped put it together, outstanding resources as far as TED Talks and just magazines and all kind of things, but also data and different historical documents and language guides and things that we've put together. And then a lot of the information, we went right to Forbes and pulled some of the language that's used in businesses. So hopefully this language will help you. We tried so hard to end it so that we could have question time. Vicki, how do we do?
Tracey, you have a question about defining the disability, fully able, disabled, in terms of that nature. And I know that's your wheelhouse with special recreation.
Yeah, it is. So when you're, you don't need to fully abled and all that. I tend to say, and I'm a recreational therapist is my background. And what we tend to say, and most of the time, people with disabilities don't even want you to refer to the disability. They just want you to call them what their name is. If you find that you need to, remember people first language. So Oralethea, who happens to have, cerebral palsy. Okay, knowing the right, when you have to get down and you have to talk about the disability, just knowing what the disability is important. But stay away from things like fully abled and all those categories. Really, when you talk to people in the disability community, they just prefer that you just don't even talk about that. You talk about in forms of accessibility. Can I have access to everything in your shop? Can I get in your shop, get to your shop, shop around in your business and get out? Is everything accessible to me? Is your website accessible? So really, in the disability community, they talk more about accessibility of. Access to, providing access to, making sure that I can be included in all that you do. Hopefully that helps. with that answer.
Tracey, when you said, how did you do? I was still on mute and looking for my button, but I would just like to invite everyone to, before we keep going with questions, to unmute your
Yes.
computers and give you both a round of applause.
Oh, thank you. You are just awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I love you ladies so much.
Oh, thank you.
You made our
Smile
morning.
over my face this morning.
That is awesome. I got to see your faces. That is awesome.
There we go.
Well, hopefully, you got some good information. You know what?
Oh,
Let's
great
go back
information.
to the basics. Be who you are. Use that filter. If you're unsure, ask. If, is it okay if I say, what are you more comfortable with me referring to you as? We are humans. We are great communicators. Ask the question. Educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. There's so many materials and things out there. And the language guide, I'm going to put a little precursor to that. NRPA would say to you that is what the language is today. Like Oralethea said, a month from now, there's going to be some other stuff in there. Okay. Don't feel like, oh my God, I got to keep up if I say this. And so like you're nervous about saying, be you, just be conscious. And I always say, be warm, welcoming, the incredible people you are. You couldn't have businesses, right? So you know what it means to market yourself. Be warm and friendly. Read that body language. When you hit somebody different, go, wait a minute. I saw you look a little different. Everything okay? It's okay to say that and ask that and form that human bond and say, I'm learning. Please forgive me. The last thing I wanted to do was offend you. Does that make sense?
Tracey, we have a question that came through the chat from Marty, and I'm going to read it and I'm going to give my response, and you can tell me if you have something different.
Okay.
Marty is asking, when it comes to the LGBTQIA issues, is it okay to say that we are promoting learning, not lifestyle? For me personally, I would say we're not promoting anything, because you're not. What you are promoting is inclusion. And if anybody questions it, that is the response. We are promoting inclusion because the lifestyle is the lifestyle. That is who people that is who people are. It's not even who they choose, it's who they are. So at the end of the day, I've said in some of my Safe Zone conversations, somebody said, well, if you only have a small percentage of this, do you have to recognize it? And if you only have a small percentage of that, do I really need to recognize that DEI is something when we're 98% Caucasian? Do I need to address it? Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yes.
Because in my mind, I always say, if I have 5 kids, are you telling me that 4 count and 1 doesn't? No, they are all equally important. So that means the visitors that come with your usual patrons, they are just as important. The people that may see your information on the internet, also important. So who are you and what is your message and what do you want to promote? So for me, I don't feel like it's promoting anything when it comes to LGBTQI+ or racism. You're not promoting anything but inclusion. And I think that's what people need to recognize and stand on that word, because you are providing an opportunity for everyone to feel welcome.
Yeah, and you got to think about this. In COVID, coming out of COVID, I don't know that any of us can afford to exclude anybody that could bring dollars to the table. Can I get an amen? Okay, so I don't care if you're blue. Exactly. If you're blue, if you're green, if you're whatever all it is, I want you to know I welcome you, period. It doesn't mean just because you welcome people in your store doesn't mean that my lifestyle is the same as your lifestyle.
Right.
It just means my product that I sell, I think will benefit everybody, period.
Yep. That's it.
What I really,
will help
if
you.
I could add that is really why, one of the reasons, that's part of the foundation of why we formed this committee. It's not just a good idea. It's the only smart way to go about running a business, unless you want to, as you said, when it impacts the bottom line, it can affect people in a different way.
That 20% snowballs, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
20% talks to the neighbors.
Yep.
And that 20% starts going to the store that's in the next community.
Absolutely.
Next to Wheaton. And they talk, and suddenly people are like, how come you don't go down the street to such and such? Oh, well, they're not welcoming. What? Yep. Now a whole neighborhood knows it. Yep. And now for some reason, they're not coming. That's what you don't want. Yep. So it's not that because you I'm not asking you to put a flag out there saying whatever. I'm telling you, and we'll talk about this next week, that you're conscious, what's your word, Oralethea? You're intentional about your marketing materials, your language that you're using, you're intentionally welcoming everyone. So when people say, well, I don't want to be somewhere where blah, 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 you're welcome. I want you to feel welcome as well as everyone else.
That's
Okay.
so great.
And that's
That is so
often what I say. I let people know we're changing the culture here at my agency. And it's not just about changing the culture that we have internally, but it's also changing externally and those that come into our team. If you want to be a part of this team, we have a stance that everybody is included. If that is not your walk, and that's not who you want to be, then maybe our agency is not the best place for you to be. Exactly. And that's just an honest, legit conversation. And that's the same thing for employees. We're welcoming everybody. If this is not who you feel you can be, and maybe this is not the best business for you to work at, you know? So that's just something to think about. Somebody put in the chat about recognizing that somebody might identify as one gender now, and as gender fluid, they may change over time. Absolutely. Remember that. It's just like we said, language is ever evolving and changing. Sometimes people around you are changing. You've known so-and-so for 30 plus years, and now they're telling you I'm not a man. That is not who I am. I'm female. And then next week they want to go back and I'm saying, nope, this is who I am. That's who they feel. That's how they feel. You know, you can't tell someone from day to day who they should be. And recognize that's who they are and accept them for who they are. If their gender is constantly changing, it is constantly changing. That is their journey. Let them have their journey. Who are you to tell them who they should or shouldn't be? So just recognize that and be comfortable in that if you are actually accepting of all and inclusive of all. People change.
It does mean a lot, you guys. I drove up. I have a favorite Starbucks I go to. I'm ashamed to say, but I do. I have my Starbucks I go to.
No judgment.
No judgment. Okay.
No judgment.
I drink, now listen, I also drink gas station coffee, so it really don't matter. But on my treat days, I will exactly. You know, I will drink whatever, but I drove up to Starbucks and the customer service was outstanding. You know, they greet you and they're like, what do you want? And, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I got to the window and out leaned an individual who was male, but everything about him that day was female. Green eyeshadow, had the lipstick, had nails that were gorgeous. And, you know, I had to immediately, because I found myself kind of, you know, everything's on my face. I kind of, and then he looked at me and I said, you working that eyeshadow? You know, and he said, I am. And I said, give me my coffee. And we laughed and I said, see you tomorrow. Okay. So it's okay. You know, there's that hiccup of my brain was like, you working that eyeshadow? Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? Right. You got to be there. If Starbucks, one of the biggest companies, is not afraid to, they have everyone. Yep. Then we got to get over ourselves. We do.
Yeah,
okay,
because
we got to get over ourselves. Everybody else is fine with it. Let me tell you, these millennials, they don't care.
They don't.
They don't care. And if you want them in your stores, you want them accessing your businesses, we got to get over ourselves.
Yes.
54.
Shafali has a question.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't want to, it's not so much a question, but also just to sort of make sure we're tracking right and pushing towards the intention we're all looking to achieve. First, Tracey and Oralethea, thank you so much for this very brave, very just real conversation. As a person of color, I can tell you many of the examples you cited have happened to me, and I applaud your brave dialogue around this. But I also want to talk about, you know, there was a lot of conversation about being welcoming and accepting, and those to me are great first steps, but really to create the whole systems change. And part of what this committee was really intentional about in our conversations is how do we get to a place of creating equity and equality, right? Because being welcoming and accepting is one thing, but then raising the opportunity for all is really where you can change lives, where we can really create change in a meaningful way. You know, so what does pay equity mean? What does access to promotions mean? What does, you know, access to an executive level mean? What does representation in leadership roles mean? What does paying people, women or people of color from different backgrounds, the same as you would others? And I think that has to be as much a part of the conversation. And I know you guys are getting to that, but I welcome everyone who's attending this program to share your feedback with the committee on what you would like to see in terms of information on how can we actually get companies and the business community to create that equity, which is a huge part of this conversation, in my opinion.
Can I, and I love you. I just want to kiss you through the screen. We didn't already bind it, girl. Listen, let me tell you, all of anything in diversity, and I just wrote an article, it's coming out, we just wrote an article, it's coming out in a couple of weeks with iParry Magazine. And it talks about this.
Absolutely.
Yes, it talks about this. And in order for you to start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, it starts with you as individual people. Okay, you have to do the work to really explore how you feel about all of these things, right? Because then that affects us as professionals. And that's when our actions, a lot of times we don't know why we don't want to promote someone. You know, and people asking, oh, it has nothing to do with their color. That's nothing to do with the fact she's female. Well, I bet it does. And if you search back, there's a reason you feel that way. So the work starts with you, then it affects you as a professional, which affects your businesses, which then spills out into your community. It is a process and it is a walk. It doesn't just happen. We can, Shabbat's right. We can say all we want to say, but if you haven't done that deep dive to find out where your blind spots are, what do you truly feel about equality between men and women and that glass ceiling? What do you think about it? What do you think about hiring somebody with a disability? Okay, that may look different or may move slower. Do you have the patience for that? What do you feel about in your community hiring somebody of color to be the front person? Okay, not behind the scenes, not cleaning up, the front person. Okay, those are questions you have to ask yourself, because the next thing I get is, well, there's nobody that comes. Stop. 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 So it's making yourself available. It's looking and marketing to very diverse areas in different places. And then once they're there, it's, remember, diversity, you're welcoming them to the table. Okay. Equity is they have access to everything at the table. Okay. Inclusion means their voice is just as powerful as anyone else's at the table. So sometimes we do parts of it, we invite them, but we really don't care what they have to say, and we don't want to treat them as equals. You understand what I'm saying? So we do parts, but it's really, that's why I love DEI. It's all of it, not one piece is separate.
That's great. Katie had a question, and we've got just 1 minute. Maybe this is a great way to send us forth is if somebody does commit a microaggression, how I guess you'd have to decide whether they're, quote, open to coaching, but how would you guide someone who has committed a microaggression? And then we want to thank you again.
So
Oralethea, you got this.
I got it. So for purposes of time, I'll try to cover both real quickly. But when somebody makes a misstep, it is nothing, takes nothing to say, excuse me, can we have a conversation?
Yeah.
I do not appreciate being called blah, 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 blah. Or I do not like when you say XYZ, or it makes me feel some type of way. We use that a lot. We tell people a lot. Just tell people, you know what, this makes me feel uncomfortable when you say, or it makes me feel uncomfortable when you do, and I'm there. Or, you know, I heard you say the other day, and I feel this is unacceptable, and I'm going to tell you why. You have to start the conversation, because if you don't open up that door and have that conversation, they're never going to know. And in the future, every time they do or say what they did or say, you have nobody to blame but yourself, because you didn't even take the opportunity to educate. There are educational, what we call teachable moments. They happen a lot. And we don't teach at every moment, but sometimes it gets to a point where you're like, okay, so this is a teachable moment. Where am I going to stand in this? Am I going to stop and take the time to educate you, or at least tell you my feelings? Or am I just going to keep sweeping it under the rug? You're doing nobody a disservice, and you're only going to make yourself angry if you don't at least say something. So however it comes out, it comes out. At the end of the day, they don't care what they say, right?
Right.
Intent versus impact.
That is a wonderful, those are wonderful words of wisdom to send us forth with. It's 9:30. On behalf of the Wheaton Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank you, Tracey and Oralethea, for the amazing presentation. We will make all of these materials available as well as the resources in the chat. Thank you, Shefali, for adding some of those additional rich resources. I used to have an applause machine, but again, I invite you to take your videos off mute, and a round of applause, please, for our speakers and for Innovation DuPage, our amazing sponsor of this series.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thank
We
you
can't
guys
wait
for having us.
to talk to you in a
And
couple weeks.
we have one more, I was going to say, we have one more presentation in our series, and we hope that everyone will be with us. Thank you. Dr. Joshua, do you want to send us forth with a message about that?
Yes, we're really looking forward to the next session. It's going to be on Wednesday, March 9th at 8:30 a.m. And we're going to be talking about how to craft the diversity statement.
Thank you so much to all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again to Innovation DuPage and to all of you who attended.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.